So I think we have a quorum, so we could get started. Today is October 1st, 2019. We are at the work session of the Austin City Council here in the Boards and Commission Room. It is 9:08. We're going to go ahead and begin. I had pulled an item, colleagues, about public health. It was item number 98. My questions have been answered. If no one else needs them to be here, then I would let those staff members leave. Okay, so staff members here on item 98 can go. Thank you.
Can I introduce Nuria?
What?
Can I introduce Nuria?
Yes.
Great.
Hi.
Mayor, Council, I just want to take a moment before we start this morning to introduce our new Deputy City Manager, Nuria Rivera-Vandermine, and she is coming to us from the great city of Minneapolis, but also has done work in Boston as well as Puerto Rico, and she will be overseeing the Government That Works outcome. Today is her first day, but we're looking forward to welcoming her to the Austin community. So please join me in welcoming Nuria.
Welcome home. All right, let's begin with the Land Development Code report.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Rodney Gonzalez, Assistant City Manager. To say that it's been a busy year with the Land Development Code rewrite is an understatement, and this week is kind of the pinnacle, if you will, of the work that staff has been doing this year. This is a busy week for staff. As you know, we plan to release the draft code on Friday. And what we wanted to do was take this brief opportunity to inform Council of the public participation process post-Friday and the various locations and the ways that the public can participate in the discussion of the draft code. With me today are Nick Baudet and Jessica King, who will go further into detail about that public participation process.
Thank you, Rodney and Nick Baudet. To say October is going to be busy is an understatement. We have a lot of activities for the public with the purpose to educate and inform, so all stakeholders and residents can participate in reviewing the draft that's scheduled to be out this Friday. What's new to report today is locations for 2 open houses. The first one will be Saturday, October 19th at the Conley Guerrero Senior Activity Center from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The second one will be on a Wednesday evening on the 23rd of October from 6 to 9 at our central library. At those open houses, you can expect to be able to come and go as you please. There's no set presentation. There'll be stations around the major components of the code: transportation, environment, the zoning map, zoning in particular, and affordability and housing capacity. So anybody can come, ask questions of the leadership team. We'll have many staff there, also the core team, the auxiliary team, to answer any questions so that folks can understand the process moving forward through November and December. We'll be stressing the public hearing at the Planning Commission October 26th, which will be a key milestone in the project as well. So our aim, again, for these 2 open houses is to assure folks can get their questions answered. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Jessica King to talk about our new website and some features there that have a lot of information for the public that's being updated almost daily.
Good morning, Council. Jessica King with the Communications and Public Information Office. I think last week, I believe I sent an email out about the new website. It has more information. It's a little bit easier to use. It's a easier to use interface. But there are 3 particular areas that I'd like to draw your attention to. The first is the blog. So if you look at Learn and Ask, there's a section called Learn and Ask that allows you to take a look at both FAQs, which have been developed over the course of conversations that Anik and Brent have had in the community, and also based on past input we've received over the years. We'll keep building out that FAQ list, especially as we go, and residents can submit information or requests for information through that process, and we'll look at that, look for trends, and then identify frequently asked questions that we can share with the public. The second part of that Learn and Ask is also a series of blogs that we've been releasing slowly but surely. There are 3 blogs in particular that I would really like everybody to take a look at because I think they're very helpful in understanding elements of the code. The last one was released most recently, and that gave a very thorough, detailed description about the transition zones. It linked a lot of residents to presentations that staff made, but in particular gave very easy to understand responses to questions that we've heard in the public about transition zones. So we encourage people to take a look at that. There's also another blog that we updated based on resident feedback and based on council feedback with regards to how single-family homes are treated in the transition area. And so those are two really critical ones. We've had a lot of questions as well about the difference between the numbers 410 or the 405 capacity, the 405,000 capacity number that we are looking towards, as well as the 135,000 capacity number. Not capacity, goal, housing goal. So a lot of people have asked, what is the difference between those numbers? And those numbers have gotten convoluted in many ways. And so there's a short but very clear explanation of the difference between those two numbers that I hope the public sees as being very lay-friendly and they can read and understand. There are more blogs coming, and we will work towards that end, especially, I think, on the environment, especially after the last presentation with regards to concerns about drainage and the environmental issues in general. The last part that I find that we are building out and we need your help with is the events section. It's the first part of the page to the right side of the page, and it identifies all the different events that are occurring in the community. As we are able to build out office hours and finalize the office hours schedule, we'll be posting that information on the events. We've already listed the town hall events that we are aware of, and so if there are other council town hall meetings that you are interested in having, please let us know and we can populate that information. We've also updated the information with regards to the open houses that are about to occur. So that information is all listed on the events, and it provides access to information for the rest of the public that is quick and easy to use to understand where we're going in terms of the events. Overall, we look forward to being able to provide a very clear understanding of what the next steps are in the process. There seems to be some general misunderstanding about how the code will be adopted, and so we want to provide some clear understanding about what the steps are in that process, and we'll share that also through the website.
What's the URL?
Excuse me?
Could you just tell folks what the URL is so they can find it?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, austintexas.gov/LDC.
Mayor and Council, that was our briefing for this morning. Before we end, we wanted to, of course, thank staff for all the diligent work that they've provided since the beginning of this year through today. And we look forward to, of course, releasing the draft code on this Friday. And we also thank Council for, one, your policy direction provided to staff in May, but two, most importantly, being willing to engage in special council meetings to deliberate topics leading to eventually the draft rewrite that you will see in front of you on Friday.
Kathy?
Just a couple of quick questions. So last time we had a portal for council questions and answers. Is there an intent to have such a portal online?
Yes, there will be. So on the date of release, which is October 4th, we will prepare that and have that ready to go for the council
Great.
offices to submit their questions.
Okay, super, thank you. And then in terms of what we'll receive on Friday, will we be receiving paper copies of the code as well as an online link?
Yes, we are printing paper copies for council offices, I believe 2 per council office, and also maps in different various sizes. We've had a request for rollable, kind of toteable size, as well as poster board size. And so we plan on delivering those late in the afternoon Friday, if not Monday. So that is the plan for council offices.
Super, thank you very much. And what time do you suppose the link will go live on Friday?
We're shooting for pencils down around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and then we need some time, so maybe around 3 or 4.
Okay, thank you.
Leslie?
We've been asking for some time to get an idea about how many units have been put on the ground since I think the clock started ticking on the 135 and the 405,000. The clock started ticking, I think, in April of 17. So where are we in getting, I think it's NHCD was going to provide those numbers, but they're part of this team. So can we expect also to have that dashboard in our hands this week as well?
So As you all know, there's a special called session on October 8th, specifically to dive into the housing capacity and the report card that is going to report on how the LDC revision is performing with regards to the goals in the council direction. And so I don't know if we will have that this week, but we will be prepared to report on that delta of what has happened since our data starting point to now. So we're aware of that request, and we'll be able to report that in context with the whole performance of the code. If we can get it before, I will certainly distribute it through CMO, but we're still working on that.
Well, I was looking at the data sets in Open Government website that we have, and there are housing starts by district, there are housing starts by year, and permits pulled and that sort of thing. So I think we have the data. I think we just need to get a summary representation of it and if it's too much out of sync with the release of the maps, and if it hasn't been consulted, frankly, in the development of the maps, then that may be a criticism that the public may bring to us that I think could have some justification. So to the best of everybody's ability, I think we need to get those summaries, dashboard, report card, whatever it's being called, so we know what we're looking at, and we can see our accomplishments over the last 2 years, because I think they've been many. According to the Apartment Association, there were something like 66,000 new starts or units on the ground over the last, I can't remember what the time period was, but it was the last year or two, which is significant. But we don't hear that here. And so I think we may all be coming to this conversation thinking that we're still at ground zero. But I think this council in particular, the 10-1 council, has labored really hard in these fields to good effect. And we have had, in fact, significant upticks in building. So I'd just like to see the real numbers on that so that we can use those.
We will absolutely have those if on the 8th, if not before. So thank you for that comment. It's really important.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Ann?
Thank you all very much for all the work that you've been doing. I know it's tough.
Your mic's
Your mic.
not on.
And there's more to be done. So anyway, I wanted to thank you to start out with. The question I had is, what will the process be for groups or neighborhoods, or if they want to propose a different approach to reach the same goals? The reason I'm asking that question is because, Mayor, I think you were perhaps the person who raised that, and we talked about it a bit at one of our previous work sessions. But we haven't actually laid out what that process is. I think what we said, and help me, Mayor, if I'm getting this wrong, but I think what we said at a previous work session is that there would be an opportunity if a particular neighborhood wanted to suggest a different approach or some changes in the approach to the mapping in their area, understanding what the goals were. So I wanted to understand what that process was going to be.
Sure, good question. And as you said, the release on Friday is the start, and we understand there'll be a community conversation and lots of further input from there. With regards to the process, we will work with CPIO to figure out the most efficient way. The first step will be we've been working on some parameters that we can release through the website and through working with you all to get information to your constituents about how to do that, some guidelines on how to do that maybe is a little more layman friendly than just reading the council direction, which could be hard for an average resident to understand. And so if you could give us a little time, we will report back with what an efficient process to gather. I imagine folks will have hard copies. They may have, in the past 2 months, I've received some information from neighborhoods in various forms, electronic, hand-drawn maps, et cetera, about existing affordable housing in their neighborhood that they wanted to make sure was counted per the council direction to not upzone market rate affordable multifamily, et cetera. So thank you for that comment, and we'll work with CPIO to figure out the most efficient way to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I know that, and y'all have done a good job of being available and meeting with neighborhoods that wanted to meet with you, as well as any other groups or individuals. So that's great. So they just need, I think people just need to understand exactly what the process is now, because I imagine there'll be some parts of town that may have ideas that they want to share as a group, and they want to present them. So I'd like to understand the specifics of what that process is. So
Okay,
when do
we'll
you think
follow
y'all
up.
might have that?
Early next week?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Allison.
Thank you, and I appreciate your willingness to meet with neighborhoods that have information that they wanted to share prior to the release. I did want to follow up on a request that I've made a couple times, which is, can you provide us some modeling of how you actually get 4 to 8 to 10 units on some of these lots? And I think there's a translation challenge that I know I'm having about how you actually get these numbers and the lots, and whether this actually requires lots to be combined, and how that plays out. Because when you try to imagine 8 units on a 5,700 square foot lot, it's challenging, and I think it's creating confusion in the community. And so if you can, I can't explain it, and just on the face of it, it's scary. And so if we can have some illustrations and modeling of what that means, or how this plays out. My sense is it involves lots of combinations of lots, in which case you're not really getting the numbers that you're talking about per lot. And so there's just some confusion that I think that would help with. So when do you think we'll get that?
Thank you. We are, as we've been out in the community, I have been explaining that concept that depending on the lot size determines the yield that the zoning district allows, and it's not always the max. And so we're working on a table that can show that and illustrate generally the square footage of a lot that generally would yield X amount of units, dependent on whether you have parking or not, because that's what we learned in testing. And so we will definitely have that information at the public testing event, if not in the staff report and or on the website. So within the next 2 weeks, we can commit. We already have a planner who's visualizing what that chart might look like in a way that's understandable to the public. So we're aware of that request and saying here that the amount of units that could yield on a typical 5750 lot is not the maximum, and lots could be combined. So we'll have that information.
So do you know what that yield is for the 5750 lot?
I wouldn't want to say a number out here without consulting, because there's various assumptions there's lot yield based on various assumptions, whether there's parking, there's not parking, what watershed it's in, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll do our best with the chart with the best scenarios that we can come up with, the most typical scenarios, which we're thinking through now.
And I don't see the public testing. When is that scheduled for?
That's scheduled for the 18th of October. Thanks for that
The
question.
18th of October, and that will be put on the website?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you.
A couple of things. I want to add my thanks and appreciation. I think everyone is excited for the next step when this comes out. Everyone eagerly looking at it this week. And I appreciate the folks that have been meeting with you, because many people across the city have. I appreciate your time out in the community. I especially appreciate the work that my colleagues did in getting the policy document out early. I think that really is a real significant difference in the process this time, in terms of narrowing the issues and providing the direction. To that end, I know that you're coming out with this document. I don't know if it's possible for you to identify some of the issues that might not have been clear in the direction that we sent, or as you're doing your work, arose or elevated as questions that the council should at least consider whether we want to give directions before the Planning Commission spends a lot of time on them. by way of further or additional policy direction from the council. If there are such points or opportunities, if you could elevate those, and then the council could make a decision as to whether or not that's something that they wanted to do. As you know, colleagues, they know I'm not here on October 8th. I'll be at the C40 meeting in Copenhagen, so I won't be here for that. But if you elevate any of those issues associated with the release on the 4th or the 5th or the 6th or the 7th, I'll try to weigh in on the bulletin board on where I might be on those things in case you all want to give some kind of direction. And I'll certainly be able to watch at least the tapes of those meetings. But I would do that so as to give the council the opportunity to help facilitate the work that happens after that. The Planning Commission might appreciate that the same way the staff appreciated the direction that the staff had as it entered into its process. At the very least, the council should have the ability to consider that. I want to join with my colleague, Councilmember Kitchen, with respect to inviting the communities. We made clear 2 months ago that we were going to give neighborhoods that opportunity, and at that time we asked for the direction or the principles that they would look at. You're going to have a lot of people on Friday. They're going to want to start that, or when the maps come out, they're going to be ready to start. So the longer it takes for you to give me, they will start on Friday. So the sooner you can give them direction so that it's constructive, the better off everybody will be. And if you know some and you don't know them all, I'd get them out. If you know some of the questions that the council might want to weigh in, don't wait to get them all. I think you could give us by way of memo or otherwise that information as you get that information, if that's appropriate for you to do. I would just try to get it out as quickly as you can. I think that we have to spend some time thinking about the calendar for us and how this is going to work, especially in December, which gives rise to November and also to January. If in fact the council is going to be able to take action given the new state law with respect to public meetings and public hearings and the like. And I don't know whether to have this conversation here or conversation next when we talk about calendar. Maybe calendar when we talk about it is the next item. But I know that that's set just to talk about the 2020 calendar beginning in January. But I noticed there are just 2 meetings, city council meetings, that are set in November and in December, on November 14th and on December 5th. We had talked about having a special called meeting the following week in December, the week of whatever that is, the 10th. But we should talk about that. And maybe we want to set the council consideration of land development code obviously on a different day than the December 5th meeting. I don't know if, having gotten so backed up as we have for the last meetings we have before we take long breaks, whether it makes sense for us to have a land development code meeting, an additional one in December in the first 2-week period of time, maybe an additional council meeting if we think we're going to have another 150 item city council meeting also in that period of time. We just have one meeting set in November. That's the November 14th. I don't know if it makes sense to have a meeting sometime in the week of November 21st, which is the week prior to Thanksgiving, if that's going to take some pressure off of the potential December meetings. But I think we should talk about that. We also have to remember that with the rules, we give the community the ability, anytime we act or vote, everyone in the community needs the opportunity to be able to speak, so we can't set a day for deliberation, for public testimony, and then a day for deliberation. So I think we really need to think through those calendar items. But I'll hold that, including the conversation on November, December, January, till we have the conversation in a second. Further comments? Leslie?
I think it would it would probably be a good idea to make for more opportunities for the public to comment, but I don't think either shortening the time frame or making it sooner is necessarily going to be a plus, because people are still going to have to take time with the document to understand the impacts in the various parts of the city.
I wasn't suggesting to shorten anything. I just so if it sounded like that, I wasn't clear.
That's great, and even if you didn't say that, I wanted to make sure that people understood that we were not going to shorten the amount of time that they have to take this in and analyze it, and also for our staff to do the same. Great.
Allison.
I wasn't fully following what you were saying with respect to the questions that might arise. Are you suggesting that there are elements of the code that staff was not able to determine from our direction and that needs further policy direction at this time? Or I'm just not sure I understood what you were getting at, and I
Haven't seen the code, as none of us have, so I can't speak to any particulars. I know that it was helpful when the council gave direction to the staff. We're about to now turn a product over to the Planning Commission. I don't know if we did such a good job in the direction that we gave back in April that there aren't really open policy questions at this point. If there are open policy questions that staff's been able to develop, either because they couldn't understand what we said and it wasn't clear, or we've identified additional ones, I was urging the staff to try to daylight those issues. If they daylight those issues, then as a council, we could decide whether or not to give direction to the Planning Commission, the same way we gave direction to the staff. If that would shorten time or enable people to work more directed or more focused. I was just opening that as a possibility, and what I said was, if there are such things and you can identify them as you introduce the code or prior to the 8th, maybe there's the opportunity for the council or members of the council to speak to some of those issues as the conversation in the community is starting.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Jimmy.
Something that Councilmember Poole said, actually, and I just wanted to double down on it will take a little bit of time for folks to receive the information and go through it. But Mayor, to your point, I don't think it's going to stop certain people from posting immediately on Friday and Saturday and Sunday their very detailed take on what's in the document. So I want to encourage the community and my colleagues to not start sharing those inevitable blog posts and articles and posts that will certainly be very definitive about what's in the document, even though at the same time we're saying it's going to take the community a little bit of time to get through it. I just think it's important to remember that there's going to be content put out, as there already has been content put out, making very specific accusations about what's in the code, and as the mayor said, none of us have seen it yet. I am excited to start getting through it. As I did with the last draft, I will read every word and every page, and I hope staff is ready for me to do that.
I wanted to add my support for having more time to discuss this together in December. I think, especially given that there's going to be a few weeks of break after that, I think it could just be helpful as we've, kind of looked at it coming out this week, had our town halls in our districts. Planning Commission, I noticed in the upcoming events wasn't on there, but I know you're developing it, so I'm sure it'll get in there. But I wanted to kind of add my support for having that extra time in December. I think the more that we can deliberate over it and really hash through what's in it and making sure that it meets all the criteria we set forth, which I'm sure that it does, I think that could be extremely helpful. And I also heard it is Jessica's birthday. I'll spare you the singing because I'm certainly not going to make you sit through that, but I just appreciate you being here on your birthday.
Mayor
Just
Pro
for
Tem.
schedule-wise, on the 8th is there a way to move that special called meeting up to 9 o'clock? Because there was an event at the library that I had planned on attending, and I know that Councilmember Flanagan is planning to be there as well. And I didn't know you were gone, Mayor, so somebody else can run the meeting if I'm not here, but I also wanted to be a part of the conversation, and I know that Councilmember Flanagan does too. So can we move that 8th up to 9 a.m.? Is there a way to do that? If that works for everybody.
I would just say, just to be specific, it's the National Coming Out Day event that the LGBT employee group is putting together.
So what time is it set to start now? 11:30?
No, 10. Sorry, the special call to start at 10, or I'm sorry, 10, but then the event at the library is at 11:30.
Okay, without objection? you can do-
I have a doctor's appointment, and I can't be here before 9:30.
Could people do 9:30?
Yeah,
Or agree to a hard stop at 11:30 and come back?
take a long lunch.
I would rather do that. I mean, I think a lot of us had that event on our calendar and plan to attend, and that's what my assumption was, that we would either stop and come back or end in time for us to get there. That's typically an event that multiple council members attend.
Okay, so then, since you'll be gone, Mayor, I'll do a hard stop at 11:30.
Okay.
Are we changing the time?
And we
To
also,
start? We're not changing, okay. So we're going to start at 10 o'clock on the 8th and then have a hard stop at 11:30, or
Yeah.
before 11:30? Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I have a related question.
Yes.
And I assume that means that the Housing and Planning Committee meeting's not going to happen that day?
Mayor, it's scheduled as a joint meeting because we have to
Oh,
approve some
okay.
stuff, and it was going to get presented at Housing and Planning, but we recognize there's something everybody would want to be a
Okay.
part of. So the mayor pro tem and I are going to work out how to run it, but it is a joint meeting, sort of how we have HFC and a council meeting at the same time.
Okay.
Mayor, I would point out that I'm here on the 7th, in case anybody would want to meet on the 7th. Yes.
I have a Capital Metro meeting at 10 that day, October 9th.
It's the
On the 9th, on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're talking about the 8th on these meetings right now. The 8th.
I'll leave at 9:30.
On the 9th. We're talking about the 8th. Tuesday. Yes, Allison.
I just wanted to clarify then that we're going to stop at 11:30. It's not that we're coming back at 1, because I have an afternoon full of appointments. That I had thought this was an hour and a half, 2-hour meeting. If it's going to be longer, then I'd like to know that. I just don't know what the expectation is.
Anik, Rodney, do you have any sense of how long the content that we would want to present on Tuesday would be?
So we had anticipated a total meeting length of 2 hours, which included the staff presentation and, of course, dialogue between council. But given the issue that's been pointed out, if we start at 10 with a hard break sometime before 11:30, we could come back. We certainly are willing to be here as long as council wants to deliberate. We didn't necessarily envision a full day deliberation, but more like 2 hours. But we certainly are willing to work with council in that regard.
Mayor, I have a suggestion. Did you say you could be here at 9:30?
Yeah, I can be here at 9:30, 9:40, but you can start at 9:30.
Okay, my recommendation would be that you start at 9:30 and then work and then take a break and accomplish as much as you can accomplish in that time, and then not come back.
I will mention that we do have our 3 consultants here, so it would be a really good time to deliberate and ask a lot of questions regarding the affordability calibration. We'll have Eco Northwest here, as well as the housing capacity, and we will also have the first glimpse of the report card and the performance. So we anticipated 2 hours, but I wanted y'all to know that there will be a lot of content there. So if you wanted to go longer, the consultants are here all day, as staff has blocked off. So at your pleasure.
I would also urge, again, consistent with what I said a second ago, and in my absence, that when you're together on the 8th, that you consider whether or not there should be an additional special called meeting soon after the 8th, if in fact council wants to give direction based on what it receives, rather than waiting until it's gone through the whole process. Obviously, if council doesn't want to, doesn't need to, if it's not appropriate, then you shouldn't. But if council already knows where it is on certain issues and can give that direction to the planning commission, that might save everybody time and focus people on what it is that is at issue. So I would urge my colleagues on the 8th, when you're together, to consider whether or not that makes sense to do. Okay, anything else on this? Yes, Andrew.
We had talked about the discussions around special called meetings in November and December, and I just want to appreciate that, and I look forward to continuing that dialogue, because obviously when we adopted the calendar for 2019, we had no idea how the land development process would play out, and so this is a very appropriate discussion to see what, if any, and how many and when we would have those additional meetings to talk specifically about the land development code. So I'm looking forward to that as we transition to the calendar. But I did want to just express my appreciation for the staff. They've been doing incredible work, and Friday will be a milestone, but it's just that, another milestone. The work that the council did leading up to the May policy direction, the continued work over the course of the summer, and with the community to get that input that led us to this point. But this is just another step along the way, and so I really appreciate all the work that's taken us to this far.
Mayor,
Yes.
on scheduling, I'll make the accommodations and make things work. I will say that the week before Thanksgiving, since it's pretty soon, harder for me, but I will figure it out if I have to. December being further out is easier to move things around, and I imagine that's not just me, but probably others too. And I do want to emphasize something that Councilmember Flanagan and Councilmember Alter both said. As this is released on Friday, I do think that it's really important for folks to take into context that on many smaller lots, it's very clear that maxing out what it is that is being put there isn't possible, and that we're trying to put together a code that works for folks, and so for folks to immediately jump to the conclusion that on a standard lot every lot is going to be maxing out at 10 units is just something that people should not anticipate is the case, and so we'll get that modeling back. But I just think that folks on Friday should be conscious that we're going to be having conversations about how that all works.
Kathy?
Yeah, I just have to say then then I would question the feasibility and the wisdom of putting that kind of zoning on what are currently pretty small tracts. And so you just, we can't have it both ways. I mean, if we're asking people to contemplate what it is that we're proposing, and it says you can build 6 to 10 units, then it's a natural question. If that's not achievable, why would that zoning be mapped on what might right now have the capacity of 2 houses? I mean, we've all seen draft maps, and it's very clear that that's what's happened in certainly in the neighborhoods I represent. So I appreciate that the modeling will show us what's achievable and what isn't, but people have to evaluate what it is we're telling them the capacity would be if these zoning changes go through.
Okay. And we're going to bleed from this into calendar, because it's the very next thing that's coming up. But with respect to the calendar, before you leave and the calendar people come up, I really think there needs to be thought given to how we're going to be handling the land development code. People had talked about having a first reading, if possible, in December. Well, what does that actually mean, and what does that look like? And I think somebody needs to be giving thought to that. Right now, we just have 2 meetings that are set. Again, one is in that November 15th day, and the November 14th, and the other one is December 5th. So I think some consideration needs, if we're going to have a special call, then it needs to be the following week. We need to check and see if we have people here on the 12th, see if council members would, if there was going to be one, does it make more sense for it to be, based on people's calendars, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, not necessarily the Thursday of that week, to see where people's calendars are. And if we're going to have a day that's deliberation, do we also want to have an additional day for the public to be able to speak to us? When we did this last time, we had a meeting on Saturday where we invited people to come in and talk about it. So I don't know if it makes sense to have a deliberation day That would be on the Saturday. That would be before that. Saturday, the 7th is a potential possibility. We wanted to open up for the public to be able to speak on a Saturday again. We know that we have to give people a chance to speak on the same day that we're going to deliberate. And that makes things difficult under the new legislature. And I'm trying to figure out how to make that work as a practical sense. You know, part of what we just did last week or 2 weeks ago on the homelessness debate, I think we were anticipating having more time to be able to talk, but we had a lot of people that showed up. And I don't know whether we should consider having days that are set aside as really public deliberation days, where people are given, a full 3 minutes to be able to speak. And then on the days that we actually are going to deliberate, it's a chance for people just to basically wave to us. And we limit debate to 30 seconds a person on the days when we're actually deliberating, because those are mainly deliberation days. We'd be required by law to give people a chance to speak. For me, that's okay, so long as prior to that we have given people a full-throated opportunity to be able to speak. But I think we should consider what that looks like in December. And if we're going to do that in December, whether that means there should be even an abbreviated second meeting in November so that we avoid having a 150 agenda item day. Greg, and then Leslie, and then Allison.
He does get to call on people. So I don't know if the state law requires that the hearing be on the exact same day as the vote. I know that we have to give everybody a chance to talk, so I would want law to look at if we have a council meeting that stretches over 2 days and the testimony is in the first day, if we're able to deliberate in the second day, or just for us to figure out how that might work. So I looking over the state law, I don't know how clear it is that it has to be on the same date, but I'm sure the law department can advise us on how to sort it.
As we've talked about, if you have a work session, we don't have public comment at a work session, so you can have the conversation just among the council. If you have a public hearing, the individuals will be able to come and talk.
I just mean if we have the public hearing, if on Tuesday we post ourselves for a vote and people come and talk and they talk all day, and then we hold that council meeting over to the next day, as we sometimes do, if whether or not folks are entitled to speak
You're still
the
in the
next day.
same meeting if you under the Open Meetings Act, if you go to the second day. And I think in the rules that you all are going to be considering, there you can have some delineation. You can make rules about how long people are able to speak. So if people have already spoken and then they're speaking again on the same topic, the next time, you can change how long they have to speak.
I just mean if it's within the same
I
meeting.
understand what you're asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. And your answer to that was if we convene a meeting on Tuesday and everyone speaks, because we're intending or have the possibility of voting on that day, but we don't get to that place and the meeting extends over to Wednesday, we don't have to open it up for public comment again.
If you're in the same meeting, you're allowing everybody who's registered to speak, and you can have a cutoff time, for example, so people need to come and register by X time, and then you can continue your conversation and debate and take an action.
Got it. Okay. Leslie.
It was a little confusing. I wanted to make sure that people know the dates we're talking about. I think this calendar is for next year. So the Saturday that you were referring to is the 9th for this year. It's next year. It's the 7th.
That's what I said, December 7th. This Saturday for this year would be December 7th. After
So you were talking
meeting on
about
the 5th.
December. Okay.
December. I was just trying to figure out in December if we're going to.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't really want to jump down that rabbit hole. What I did want to say, because the calendar is getting confusing and maybe we should just go to the message board to get it worked out, is I was trying to understand, you had said a couple of times, Mayor, that if staff has questions on guidance that we gave in May that they wanted to ask us about, to do so, to surface those questions, and then we can try to answer them. And I finally figured out what it maybe is, and that is the point that Councilmember Tovo made about the small lot situation, where we just had a little bit of discussion here previous to Kathy's comment that, of course, we're not going to put 6 to 10 units on a small lot And then Kathy pointed out, yes, but that's the direction that we gave in that guidance document in May. So I think that we do need to clarify that and maybe make some changes so that the community, so that the public understands that we have changed that, sounds like, from what I'm hearing from both you and from Greg. I'm certainly pleased to hear that because I think there's a limit to how much density you can put on a certain size of a footprint. So if indeed we are going that direction, then I think that is something that we need to clarify. And I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding where Councilmember Tova was coming from. Is that a close approximation of the question that you were asking or the point that you were making? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, I think I was just really highlighting the challenge of both the policy direction and some of the mapping, frankly. And I think it is something once we see the maps and the public sees the maps, we'll have to have a conversation around. Because if the expectation is that people will continue to be guided by what is feasible on a tract, then it's not at all clear why we would have zoning on there that so far exceeds the capacity, unless we're intending for people to be able to aggregate sites and build to the capacity that way. But again, I think that conversation will make more sense once people see the maps.
And I didn't have that in mind, although that certainly fits within the broader thing. I was thinking about when we were here 2 weeks ago or last week, whenever it was a question about when someone chose to demolish a house in a transition zone, would they be able to build back their house? And I think that staff, indicated that they would let people build back their house. And then the question was, could they build back just their house, or could they build a McMansion back? And that involved a policy question and a preservation question with respect to trying to preserve the existing house. Were we going to let people in transition zones tear down a small house, not build a duplex or a triplex because they've decided not to do that, but build a really big home? That might be a question that might be susceptible for a conversation on the dais. Now, whether we do that one or not, I don't know. I just remember hearing that question and thinking if we could decide that question quickly, then we might save the community weeks of consternation on that kind of issue. And I don't know whether that is appropriate for this or whether there are other things appropriate for this. The one that has come out here might be appropriate for that. I was just throwing it out, that as a council, we ought to take a second to see if there are things we can do or if it's appropriate for us to do that kind of stuff. Allison.
So this might be a question for Anik. When is the Planning Commission supposed to come back with a recommendation? Because I don't believe as council we can take this up on first reading until we've heard from the Planning Commission.
Right now they're scheduled to vote on November 12th. So they have their public hearing on October 26th, and they have a few days set forth for special meetings. I believe November 5th and 6th are two of those days. There might be more, and then they are poised per their schedule that they adopted several weeks ago to make their final recommendation November 12th to the council.
Okay. So depending on what the Planning Commission changes or how many changes there are, I think that's going to ultimately affect our timeline. I would opt for us to have as many meetings scheduled that we can cancel if we need to. It's just much easier to have them on the schedule, and we all welcome having a free few hours that's not scheduled rather than trying to scramble as we've been having to do time and time again over the last month and a half. So I would really welcome us trying to get as many meetings as we think we might need on the calendar and then some, and then we can scale back and having a clear idea of when we would be starting up again in January should we need to be flowing over to January. I am concerned, depending on what the Planning Commission recommends, about the community also having an opportunity to digest that and provide us feedback in a timely manner given the holidays and everything else. going on. I want to also point out that we had said that our October 31st meeting would be over at a reasonable hour so folks could celebrate Halloween with their family, both staff and council, and the public. And I would very much support another meeting in November and another meeting in December, whether they're for the code or for other things. I think that would be helpful breathing room for us in the process.
Thank you. Greg?
So to the question of whether or not there's a change on whether those missing middle zones should have a density bonus that allows you to get a higher number of units to provide affordable units, I still believe that that's a good thing, and I want to see people participate in that. All that I was raising was that just like lots of our existing zoning categories, sometimes a lot may not be big enough or may not be the right kind of lot to really get you to the full capacity of that zoning. And sometimes people put lots together. Sometimes the lot is so small that an MF lot can only build a single-family house. And so I just want us to treat these transition area zones just like we treat other zoning categories and map them the best that we can, but not assume that every single lot is going to be able to max out entitlements. And everybody here on the dais knows that, because that's what we deal with in every single council meeting. And I just think that we need to continue to communicate that to people, that we need to understand the full text of the document and not just go off of what somebody might view as a worst case scenario on every single lot.
Okay, anything else on this before we let these folks go? Thank you very much.
I have one question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So in terms of the, I anticipate that there will be additional policy questions that we need to discuss. I mean, we just talked about one of them, and I'm anticipating there will be others. So I would just ask that we have you guys can think about it, but we have a process that we understand on how we raise those. There are some, the policy document's a fairly long relatively long and detailed document, and so there's a lot of complexities to it. I think we've hit a lot of the high points, and I appreciate the briefings that we have, but we certainly haven't discussed how every aspect of that policy direction has been interpreted, nor could we have anticipated how it might work together in certain areas. So there will be policy, and I imagine that we may raise some, and that some will come to your attention in other ways. So I would like to have a list, and I'd like to understand when we can do that. I don't have a thought about when that should be or how that should be. I just think we need some clarity. So otherwise what's going to happen is each of us is going to say, I've identified one, so I'm going to bring it on this date. And I mean, I don't want to do it scattershot. I think it's more important for us to identify what those are. And so I'm open to whatever that mechanism is. I just think it'd be important for us to understand what those are. We know that there will be, and there are. I've already seen one or two myself. And a lot of them probably need to be discussed in context together. So
it may be, and you can check with calendars and people and offices, but if the meeting was on the 8th and they got the report either prior to the 8th or on the 8th, you identified the policy questions you saw, giving the council members the opportunity to be able to augment that list, maybe the possibility we could do a special call on either the 14th or the 16th of October, just for the purpose of being able to discuss those kinds of policy questions together as a group. If that works for people's calendars or they could move things around, might make sense.
Mayor?
Yes.
I don't even know that it has to be that soon, because it may take a little while to surface some of the policy issues. I just think it's somewhere in the process. My gut would be that we would want to address them before the Planning Commission takes up their issue. But I do think we need to allow a little time for the public to raise some.
And I would suggest that it wouldn't be exclusive.
Okay.
I would handle on the 14th and the 16th. If there were 3 that we could handle then, that we knew we could handle those. And if it made sense for us to come back the following week and pick up another 3, I mean, I think that kind of work would be really helpful for the community for us to do.
Okay.
So I'll, from my calendar, try to be as flexible and accommodating as I can
Okay.
for the council to
Okay.
fill
I-
that function as often as it made sense to do.
Okay, I know it's not as clean, it's not black and white or anything, but to the extent that we can have a list that we're looking at, so that we understand the scope of them, that would be helpful. So,
Jimmy?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Kitchen. I don't want staff necessarily to go down, I wouldn't want staff to go down a rabbit hole trying to figure out every kind of split difference, because at the end of the day, I think we're all going to bring back the 2 or 3 things we find. I don't think there's any way to stop that, but I think there are probably like some 3 or 4 high-level ones that staff knows, and it would be good to daylight those, but we're all going to bring our own stuff anyway.
yeah, well, they may hear things from the public too, so.
I just wanted to chime in quickly about a bunch of the comments that have been made, and I think this is where Councilmember Kassar was trying to get at in this. We know there's a lot of attention on this issue, and the more, I know we don't all agree on all of it, but the more the message can be that what is released on the 4th is a draft, is what I think is important. And so, the question of, I don't know what to tell people who are asking me how many units they can put on a lot. I feel like the response is, staff is going to release something and we're going to talk about it, and this is a draft and there's nothing final about this, and I guess I hope that's where, even though we may not agree in a lot of these areas, I'm still very concerned about what I believe are a lot of scare tactics out there. And I mean, it was frankly amazing that the day after we had this discussion, that day there was more information put out saying that what is happening on Friday is going to change your lot forever. And so I guess I would just plead with my colleagues that we all are aware that this is a draft, and regardless of where policy direction was and what comes out, we can have those discussions. We can walk back what we didn't think was what we thought might have been the right way to go, and maybe after seeing maps is not appropriate. But I just don't feel it's right to be, scaring folks. And there's time. We have time, and we have time to make changes. And I hope we can do what's best for our community and not try to be scaring folks.
Greg?
Since Councilmember Alter raised the Halloween council meeting issue, I continue to support and think it's great for us to get out early that afternoon. I do want to ask the manager that if our council meeting agenda looks like it will be long, that maybe we have to poll each other to see whether we're free the next morning or something, because I'm ready and willing to come back on Friday if that's necessary for us to end that afternoon early, or for us to have to accommodate it with other meetings. And I'm not stating here that that's what we have to do. I just want to raise it as one option or possibility. Of course, if we have a short enough council meeting that we can just get out, great. But I don't want us to wind up in a tension where we have too many items and not an option for how to address them.
To that end, I would say real fast that we shouldn't have procs or music on that night, so that people can get out, as we talked about earlier, so that people could be with families, everybody. And I would also be available that Friday if people wanted to extend over to that day. Kathy?
To be clear, I thought we talked about ending at about 3 that day.
Yes. That's what we're
Okay.
So,
That early.
I'm anticipating that we're gone long before procs would even come up.
Yeah, and staff has known about this for months since we adopted the budget last year, and so we know that as we prepare the agenda, we have 3 council meetings this month, and so we are planning to make sure that we end in
Right.
time and only have enough items that can be deliberated during that time.
Thank you.
Cool. Anything else on this? All right, for real this time you can go.